Hi guys, I'm Briggs and I'm here with Jerry, and we're going to be talking about his experience in the military. So, Jerry, my first question is kind of basic. What motivated you to join the military?
Well, you have to go back to before the early 1970s.
Mhm.
Basically, from 1940 to 1971, 2, 3, somewhere in there was military conscription, the draft.
Yeah.
So most people who were in the military were either drafted or, in my case, enlisted in lieu of the draft.
Hmm.
You had more choice, more options as to where you might be and what you might be doing by volunteering in lieu of the draft. And in fact, most people who did volunteer did back then did volunteer in lieu of being drafted.
Okay. So, say there was no draft. Do you think you'd have enlisted?
Probably not.
Okay. And you joined the Navy, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
The Naval
So,
Reserve, actually, but yes, the
yeah.
Navy.
So, what do you recall about the day you enlisted?
Uh, well, okay. Just I don't recall much about that, but you actually join often well before you actually go on active duty or whatever.
Mhm.
So it was like 3 months before I actually went on active duty that I actually joined.
Yeah. So, how did you envision life in the military before you joined?
I had no preconceived.
So, pretty much blind going in.
Yeah, I mean, I knew they'd be disciplined,
Yeah.
but uh, but details and and also being in the Navy, it's a whole different animal than being in any other service.
Yeah.
Was because you live in an alien environment that people are not supposed to be living there.
Yeah. So, do you have any stories or just a general idea of what boot camp was like?
No, nothing along those lines.
So,
I got plenty of good stories, but
yeah, we'll get to those. I'd love to hear some of those. So what was your primary job after training?
okay. Well, okay. Once I was on the ship I was on, which I'll give you a fancy title, it was a Fram 1 Gearing class destroyer.
Okay.
Okay. Gearing class was a class of destroyer built towards the end of World War II. And FRAM stands for Fleet Rehabilitation and Maintenance. And the ship was actually built on Staten Island at the Bethlehem Steel Works, and the FRAM took place at the Brooklyn Navy Yard in 1960-61, where basically the entire top of the ship was removed except for two gun mounts and a whole new stuff uh, set of stuff. The ship was rebuilt from the main deck up,
Wow. Yeah.
modernized.
So and what did you specifically do?
Okay. Now, in the Army or the Navy, or I mean the Army, the Air Force, you do one thing. Remember, on a ship, it's it's a world.
Yeah.
That's the whole world, and you have many different jobs. Uh, so my 9 to 5 job, I did clerical work.
Okay.
Okay, but do you want to hear all the other jobs?
Yeah, go ahead. I've
Okay,
got time.
okay. When in port, I had port watches, such as Messenger of the Watch, Pier Century, uh, plus, when in port, duty section, something might come up while you had to be on the ship when anybody else could be off. But at sea, you have numerous things. Well, have you ever noticed when a ship leaves or comes into port, you see sailors out on deck in their nice uniforms and things like that?
Yeah.
That's called sea and anchor detail. So you have an assignment for sea and anchor detail. You stand watches. I stood watches on the bridge. I was on the helm, on the lee helm. I was a lookout. I also served some watches uh, in the combat information center, looking at a radar screen or some other things. Uh, then you have replenishment detail.
Mhm.
You know, you don't pull into port and get more food and more gun ammunition or whatever. You do it at sea. It could be dropped off by a helicopter, dropping it, or usually in the form of cables, either bringing pallets over or hoses bringing over fuel.
Yeah.
So you have replenishment detail. That you have your battle station. Uh, Now, many of these things can be the same thing. Like you could be a boiler technician, let's say, and your your 9 to 5 job is in the boiler room, in a boiler room working, and your battle station, you might be doing the same thing, though you might be in something else. You might have some other job during a battle station. Maybe you're handling ammunition, or you're on a damage control team or something. But you could, and again, for all these different details out at sea, it's possible for a few people it's all the same. But for most people on the ship, whether they're enlisted or an officer, they have all sorts of different jobs, depending on what the ship is doing.
Okay, that was great. That was a lot of information. Uh, so where did you serve the majority of your service?
All right, I was on a destroyer, the USS Charles R. Ware, DD 865 is the designation of the ship. It was home ported just south of Jacksonville, Florida, and at the Mayport Naval Station. Uh, and I was on it for um, about 14 months, just over 14 months, and we spent half of it uh, going over to Vietnam, being there and coming back.
Okay. So now going off of that, while in Vietnam, again, this question might be a little uncomfortable, and I understand if you don't want to answer. Did you see combat?
Yes,
If
almost got killed.
wow, uh, if you feel comfortable going into more detail, go ahead. I understand.
Okay. Okay. Have you heard of the Ho Chi Minh Trail?
Yes.
Okay. That was not the only route supplies were sent from North Vietnam south. They also sent boats down the coast.
Mhm.
My ship, for about a month maybe, was assigned to Operation Sea Dragon, which was 2 destroyers and a cruiser operating 1 to 5 miles off the coast of North Vietnam, and maybe even a little closer at times, to intercept boats going down, supply boats going south down the coast of North Vietnam. Uh, sometimes, uh, sometimes uh, North Vietnamese army would shadow the boats along the coastal road. I recently learned that was Highway 1 in North Vietnam, and 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 when we engaged the supply boats, they would open fire. Not always, but sometimes. Now, one time they actually tried it was basically a trap. It was during the day. They put together a large group, call it a convoy if you want, of these supply boats, had them coming out of a major river and heading south. But they had assembled a large number of artillery pieces, okay, and to shadow the boats. So when the three of us, the three ships, came in on the supply ships, and we opened fire. Shortly thereafter, all right, my battle station, this I say this jokingly, but it's absolutely true. I went into battle. I did go into battle, and and when I went into battle with a telephone. Now, you see, everybody smiles or laughs at that because let me explain it to you. On a modern warship, basically one person fires the guns and everybody else does something else. And would you be surprised to learn that when a US Navy ship goes into battle, more people are doing nothing than any other job on the ship? Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
No idea.
Okay. More people are assigned to damage control teams
Okay.
than any other job on the ship when a ship goes into battle. Uh, so, so those guys, the Baroni guys back then, sit in the passageways, not hallways, passageways with their fire hoses and axes and picks and all sorts of stuff. Uh, and you want them to do absolutely nothing. You
Yeah.
don't want your damage control teams to have to do anything. And but also a little history going back to World War II. The damage control on U.S. Navy ships was superior to all the other navies in the world,
Mhm.
and a lot has to do with the number of people assigned to working on that when a ship goes into battle. But anyway, so so I so I was up on the bridge manning what is called the JC circuit, C for communications. So I had on on my circuit, I had the signal bridge, the radio room, the auxiliary radio room, and an extra line into the combat information center. And and we would hear uh, over one of the other circuits on the ship called the 20MC, which is like a backup PA system. An electronics tech would come on and say, cross slot radar bearing, whatever the bearing was. And that, that was the North Vietnamese fire control radar. They would turn it on for 20 to 30 seconds and then shut it off because they learned that the U.S. could home in on their fire control radar. So they would put it on quickly, shut it off, and then and then maybe 20, 30 seconds later, or maybe a minute, the North Vietnamese artillery would open up.
Mhm.
And and in this situation, it was the only time I ever, uh, for a few seconds, was, you could say it like I had the center of attention on the bridge.
Yeah.
Uh, I got a call from a guy named Al Mansfield up on the signal bridge, who he would go bridge signal bridge, meaning I'm calling the bridge from the signal bridge, and I'd answer him. Uh, uh, Bridge, he'd go bridge signal bridge, and I'd go signal bridge bridge, and he would say, and then he said airburst relative bearing, uh, uh, relative relative bearing 20 degrees, meaning from the front of the ship, figure 360 around, relative to the front of the ship, 20 degrees. So I, in a booming voice, said, airburst, relative bearing 20 degrees, or 020, and maybe it was. And that's the only time I ever commanded the attention of the of the entire bridge. And then a few seconds later, again over the 20 MC, Sonarman Second Class Kelly came over with underwater explosion bearing something, and that's when all hell broke loose. And we're firing, they're firing at us. Now there are three ships. That was a unit, and the unit commander was on the cruiser, which was the USS Boston. Do you know anything about the USS Boston?
No, I do not.
It was the first U.S. Navy ship where they removed the guns from the back of the ship and installed missile launchers, two missile launchers. This was back, I don't know, in the 60s, 50s, 60s, somewhere in the 60s, I think. Okay, so anyway, this is 1967, by the way. And now, in ship-to-ship communications, line of sight communications, there's a book of 2-letter codes using the phonetic alphabet. The one that most people will remember is Bravo Zulu, which means well done. Okay, that was not, no one called Bravo Zulu, but the unit commander gets on this circuit that the line of sight communications, and gives an order in this code, Romeo November, RN. Okay. If you want to know what that means, just put a U in between the Romeo and the November. He's really saying Romeo uniform November, but it's a 2-letter code, so it's Romeo November. So immediately the captain orders a change of course, right full rudder, left full rudder, whatever, and we're zigzagging, and there were now the so we're getting out of there. We can the cruiser can't fire back. The Boston has no guns in the back. They had 6 8-inch guns up front, but that doesn't help you any. And then the other destroyer, I can't remember its name, had only 1 gun in the back, and it was out of action. And then, so we have 2 guns in the back. We're firing, and then eventually our barrels overheat, so we can't even fire back. But we're zigzagging and moving at 28 knots, which is pretty fast. And we hear a projectile whistling through the air. Okay. Everybody on the bridge gets very silent. Now, we hear it coming. It whistles over the top of the ship and splashes 25, 30 yards off the starboard wing of the bridge, the left side of the right side of the bridge. No, it was the port side of the bridge, the left side. And there were 2 guys standing on the port wing of the bridge. They set the world record for the 40-foot dash. In an instant, when that splash hit, they were on the right wing, on the starboard wing of the bridge. Now, but if you do the geometry, that projectile had to have flown 10 feet, 15 feet, whatever, over the top of the ship, right over where I was. If that gun had been aimed a fraction of an inch, a tiny fraction of an inch lower, they would have hit the bridge. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
So
And here you are today.
here I am today. Yes.
Wow.
Okay. Next question.
So, moving on, have you earned any medals or citations that you're especially proud of?
Well, okay. I have four decorations.
Mhm.
Okay. I'll go through all of them. One of anyone. I mean, even today, anyone who serves on active duty anywhere for 120 days during a time of combat gets the National Defense Medal. And all the people today who are in service get it. Then, because I served in the combat zone of Vietnam, I have the Vietnam Service Medal. Then, because I was in combat, I have the Navy Combat Action Ribbon, which is earned by Navy and Marine personnel who basically you got to get shot at to get the Navy Combat Action Ribbon. And the last thing that I have, which I really did not earn, I'll explain that, is the is the is the is the unit commendation.
Mhm.
Now, let me explain what happened. Now, most of the time when we were over off the coast of Vietnam, we were not in Operation Sea Dragon. We were out at Yankee Station, which is where the aircraft carriers were, and we were plane guarding aircraft carriers. And every hour, a ship has to report its position in code to a central location. For about a month or 6 weeks, somewhere in there, our ship was the central location. So maybe a dozen guys earned the whole, but the whole command, the whole unit is the whole crew of the ship is earns the commendation.
Okay. Okay. So, now I think this might be the most important question. What was the food like during your time in the Navy? I've heard rumors that the Navy has pretty good food. Or the
Uh,
other branches. I don't
okay,
know if that was back then or.
okay. No, it's a simple matter of budget.
Mhm.
Depends what time of the month. I kid you not. Okay, the 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 commissary department on the
Mhm.
ship has to run on a monthly budget. So as you get deeper and deeper into the month, the food gets less good compared to what came before. And when you get to the last week of the month, there are a lot of noodles that are served.
Did you have a favorite meal?
Not especially, steak, fried chicken, whatever.
Yeah. Uh, do you have any pictures of your time in the military that you share with people?
Well, uh, well, in the many times when ships take a cruise, meaning a deployment for a ship, a yearbook is made. They call it a cruise book, and there are we have a cruise book of the 7 month deployment.
Mm. Do you possibly have it nearby? Would you mind showing some photos?
No, I don't. I could show a picture of me that was taken by the printer of the cruise books photographer. Hang
That'd be
on.
amazing.
Here we go. Okay. That was taken in January of 1967.
Wow. Hey, you don't look a day older.
Alrighty.
So that was in January 1967, you said?
Yeah.
And you were in Vietnam then?
No. That was taken in Mayport. We left. We went 2 days short of 7 months, from February to September.
Okay. What were your relationships with your fellow service members like?
What do you mean, then or now?
Let's start off with then.
Uh, we lived together. Uh, uh, it's just like being in any large group. You
Yeah.
have friends, you have people you get along with, you have people you don't care for, and vice versa, and whatever.
Yeah. Do you have anybody who you're still in contact with?
Well, for many years, none.
None.
Then in 2005, I got involved with the ship's reunion group. We have a reunion every year, not just from when I served, but from the beginning of the ship in 1945 through its decommissioning in 1970 something. Uh, and we meet every year. Last year was the first time we didn't because of the virus.
Yeah.
And some of them were my actual shipmates, and some were not. But we have a very active group, and it's a very enjoyable activity.
Yeah. Sounds like so once a year you see them.
Yeah, for about 3 4 days. But some of us keep in touch by email and other things.
Okay. Uh so going off of that, in any other aspects does your military experience still affect your life today?
Um,
Or since you've been back home?
uh, well, I'll tell you, Age. Well, uh, this affected my life a little bit back when I got out.
Hmm.
There were a lot of mothers who were interested in their daughters meeting me because I had already been, because I wasn't going back over, as opposed to somebody who might get drafted or something like that.
Yeah. So did you meet anyone then?
No,
No.
not that way.
uh more recently, did you have any sort of experience that involves the military other than the annual?
Okay, I am very active in the Jewish war veterans. I joined in 95, and I started becoming active around 2000, 1999, around there. Uh, I've been the state commander of the Jewish war veterans, and I'm actually probably the most effective lobbyist the organization has ever had. Uh, Out of the New York State legislature, um, from about 2006 through 2017 or six, something like that.
Yeah.
I had a hand in, I think, 12, uh, 12, I think 10 or 12 different state laws, including a bill that I wrote. but I'll explain. It was an amendment of 6 words to an existing law, but I wrote it. Okay, and a few changes, 2 or 3 changes to the state budget, uh, and so I did that. And also, something else that I did, you're probably too young to know, but back in the early, around 2003, 5, something around there,
Yeah, I was born in 2003, so
yeah, there was an attempt by the VA to sell the Manhattan VA Medical Center.
I read a little bit about that.
Okay. I There were a lot of people who opposed it, but I probably was the most important person opposing it. Somebody had 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 gotten a hold of the VA's PowerPoint presentation for making changes nationally, and they sent it to me. That person, and I started going through it, and I came to the part about the Manhattan VA, and I started reading what they were doing, and it was based on something called drive time guidelines, uh, where basically 100% of veterans living in New York City lived within the drive time guidelines to all 3 VA medical centers, Brooklyn, Manhattan, and the Bronx,
Mhm.
within New York City. Now, those drive time guidelines work in Kansas where you can do 20 miles in 18 minutes.
Yeah,
Getting
focus
around
on
New York City.
traffic.
Right. So there were supposed to be 4 public hearings.
Mhm.
I testified at the first public hearing. It was in Brooklyn at the Marriott, and I was the only person to testify about the drive time hearings of the drive time guidelines.
Yeah.
Then they held their second uh, of the 4 public hearings, and it was held in Manhattan at the Sheraton, right in the middle of things in Midtown. And the chairman of the committee, Dr. Dunn, twice announced to the audience that the drive time guidelines would not be considered for making the decision, or okay, or not that wouldn't be considered, but that the drive I'm saying it wrong, that the drive time guidelines could not be violated. Oh, it was basically that they understood that that the drive time guidelines cannot go into the decision.
Yeah.
Now there were supposed to be 2 more public hearings, but nothing happened for a year and a half, and then an announcement was made that they were not going to try to close the hospital and sell the land for $600 million or something like that.
Wow. Good for you. Wow. Uh, is there any other story you have about
Oh,
your
I got a few stories.
Go ahead.
Okay,
I'm here to
okay,
listen.
okay. I, as a lookout, not in Vietnam, once identified the moon as an aerial contact. I'll explain. Okay. It was in early December 1966. Atlantic Fleet exercise, which was being held in the Caribbean. And one night, my ship, the Ware, was blockading the island of Vieques. You've heard of Vieques,
Mhm.
or just off the coast of Puerto Rico. And on the 20 to 24 watch, 8 p.m. to midnight, I was the aft lookout. I was there with my big 50 by 200 binoculars and whatnot. Now it's overcast, low clouds, but no fog or anything. And you can see the cars on VXS driving along the highways and things like that. And then all of a sudden, I see like a light up in the sky. So, bridge aft lookout, and the bridge answers. I say, aerial contact, relative bearing, maybe 170 or 160.
Mhm.
180 would be uh, straight back. And about 10 minutes later, the bridge calls me to tell me I had identified the moon. What happened was a little break in the clouds and some moonlight came through. So, so I did the right thing,
You
but
must have been real popular.
it was one of those things. Uh, uh, then I will tell you that Atlantic Fleet exercise was much more tiring than being off the coast of Vietnam. Though though one thing I could never figure out. Now now while when I was out at Yankee Station 25 miles off the coast, we replenished, during the day, no problems, whatever. But when you have to rearm in a war zone, it must be done after dark. It must be done at night.
Mhm.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. When you're right off that's okay. Makes sense. Now, again, just happened to have been on the 20 to 24 watch. I go to sleep at midnight. At 2 o'clock in the morning, reveille, set replenishment detail, etc., rearming detail, whatever they called it. Okay, but then we stand there till 3:30 till the ammunition ship shows up. Why couldn't we sleep till 3 o'clock and or 2:45? But no, they twice this happened. We got up at 2 to wait for an ammunition ship coming by at 3:30 in the morning. Okay, what other stories? Oh yeah, the major port of Taiwan in Taiwan is Kaohsiung.
Mhm.
Okay, now to get from the ship, we were in Kaohsiung 3, 4, 5 times during our cruise, uh, and you would use a water taxi to get from the ship, which was anchored in the middle of the harbor, to get to the pier. And I knew that from past experience that going um, from the from the landing to the enlisted man's club
Mhm.
was the currency of Taiwan is the new Taiwan dollar, NT.
Mhm.
Okay, so the drop on the meter is 6 NT, and when you get to where you're going, it's 10 NT
Yeah.
in a taxi. Okay, so this is maybe my third time in Kaohsiung, and me and O'Brien, who is a barber, uh, we get into the taxi going to the enlisted men's club, and the drop on the meter is reading 22 NT. The guy had his meter running. And of course, when we get to the enlisted man's club, it's reading 26 NT. So I said to O'Brien, I'll pay this one. So O'Brien gets out of the cab. I get out of the cab. I hand him 10 NT. And he points at the meter. And I say to him, now, Taiwan, the government there was not exactly a democracy. And they had a special police force known as the Foreign Affairs Police to protect tourists, etc. And there was like a police, not an office, but it was like a kiosk or something right near the EM club, the Enlisted Men's Club. And I say to the taxi driver, Foreign Affairs Police. And he says, okay. I did have
The forbidden
fir-
words.
my first and greatest culture shock was in Kaohsiung,
Hmm.
ox carts
Go
on the
on.
street. Uh, let's see. Oh yeah, the last thing I will tell you is that coming. Oh, by the way, you are actually looking at somebody who has actually set foot on Midway Island,
Okay.
for whatever that's worth. It's called Midway because it's midway between everywhere. The only thing, Honolulu is 1,200 miles, but after that, it's forget it. You're not there anywhere. But anyway, um, oh yeah. So coming home, we're coming out of San Francisco, and just before we hit the Golden Gate Bridge, we hit fog. and and so we continue out and then make a left turn to head south, and we were in fog for about 20 hours. I was not on the watch bill at that time, so I got drafted as one of the people to be on fog watch. Now you now every 2 or 3 minutes a ship is supposed to blow its horn to let other ships know where they are.
Hmm.
But so so there are two of us at a time on fog watch. One person will be on the phones while the other person is listening. And the thing is that when you hear a fog horn go off, that doesn't tell you anything other than the general direction that it's coming from. You got to hear that horn twice to know the direction the ship is moving.
Yeah.
Now you have to understand. Well, the radar can do that, except for one problem. The surface search radar that we had, the ANSPS 10, uh, doesn't pick up anything within a half mile of the ship. So if a ship is heading towards you, eventually the radar won't
Won't
be
pick it
won't
up.
be picking it up. So fog watch is very tough. Uh, and then back then, everything, well, pretty much everything was in the radar was vacuum tubes, so they would blow every once in a while. So so I happened to have been on the phones at that moment when the bridge calls down that the surface search radar just went down. They had to replace a vacuum tube. So for about 10 minutes or something, the ship didn't have radar. Now, no one knew that except the bridge and the Combat Information Center and the two guys up on the forecastle, the front of the ship,
Mhm.
spelled forecastle, uh, on fog watch. But when you hear how fog was the curse of the ancient mariners and all, it is it's worse than being shot at. When you're in fog, you are kind of helpless out there.
Yeah.
And of course, we're in very heavily used sea lanes of with many ships traveling along there, north south. San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, and then into Mexico, etc.
Yeah.
Okay. A guy I used to know, he died, and he spent 30 years in the Army and the Army Reserve, and and he told me, I was in for 30 years, you were in for two, and you have more stories than I do.
Well, I'm glad I got you. Uh, okay, so these might be a little more personal, these questions. Feel free to answer. Feel free to not. Again, if you don't feel comfortable, you
Mhm.
do not have to answer by any means. So this is more about, you being a veteran. Do you feel as if overall you are respected by other people around you sufficiently? Do you
Yeah,
notice any trends in the way you are treated?
no.
Okay, that's good. Uh, so if you're comfortable with sharing, do you receive any benefits for serving?
No, in terms of financial benefits, no.
No.
Not now. I did use the GI Bill to go to graduate school.
Okay.
That was back in the early 70s.
So are you satisfied with what you received?
Oh, oh yes.
Okay.
It was fine. I'll tell you a little story about politics. This is the GI Bill originally was paid at the end of the month.
Hmm.
Now, in 1972, there was a presidential election. And this was very smart politics by Richard Nixon. So you got your GI Bill check in the mail the end of October
Hmm.
1972. And then he switched it that you'd be paid at the beginning of the month. So a few days later, before election day, you got a second check, which so it was smart politics. But that so well, whatever.
Uh, the next question is, do you feel you had any psychological aspect of recovery after your
No,
time in the military?
no,
No.
no.
Uh, so then what do you believe is the most difficult part of your entire experience as a veteran?
As difficult as a veteran, I don't know. Well, well, I didn't really have anything. Now, as I said, I was in the Naval Reserve.
Hmm.
Now, back then, under under the under the law and the conscription law and just other laws, you had a 6-year military obligation.
Yeah.
So I mentioned to you that I got sworn in about 3 months before I went in. When I got out, I was supposed to serve another 3 years and 9 months
Hmm.
in the Naval Reserve. Well, in New York City, well, I went to
Yeah.
the Naval Reserve, office somewhere. Maybe it was down on Church Street I went or something. I don't remember where it was.
Yeah.
Uh, and I was told unless I really wanted to do it, they had too many people that I could just serve my last 3 years and 9 months before being officially discharged in the inactive reserve, which I did. So I had so that was the last contact I had with the military.
Okay. So do you feel as if you lucked out in that aspect?
Yeah, to some extent. Okay, I also got a 5 week cut in my active duty. I'll explain that. Uh, in Congress passed a pay raise for the military in 1967,
Hmm.
and it was effective October 1, right, which is the start of the federal fiscal year.
Yeah.
But but it was not going to be paid till it would be paid retroactively on January 1. So what the Navy did was not unless people were reenlisting in as long as you weren't in what they called a critical rate, a rate that they were shortage of people in, like electronics technician or something like that, then you were discharged. So I got discharged 5 weeks earlier. I was separated from active duty 5 weeks earlier than I was supposed to be. I knew somebody from my neighborhood who I later learned was also in for 2 years, Naval Reserve, and he got an 11-month cut on his 2 years.
Wow.
So he was
He
he
was the
was like
lucky one.
5 weeks is okay, 11 months.
uh, so after your experience in the military, I mean, you said you didn't have many hardships at least.
Well, maybe because when you spend 7 months at sea, which in itself is a hardship.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I was not married at the time, but the divorce rate in the Navy is much higher than it is in the other services. Because in the other services, unless you're deployed to some warfare type situation,
You're
you
home.
live with your family
Yeah.
wherever you're stationed. But in the Navy, you go out to sea, forget about it.
Yeah. Uh, so I mean, nowadays, are there any parts of your life or people in your life that you consider your greatest source of support?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Do you have anyone that, you know, I mean, you said you didn't have many hardships at least, right? I mean,
No,
being
no, no,
Navy
no, no. Of just the hardships on being on.
on a ship for so
Well,
long.
let me explain it to you with a little more detail. Let's call it 400 feet long, 41 feet wide at its widest point.
Mhm.
2/3 of the area are engines and boiler rooms. And of the 1/3 of the ship that's left, there's a lot of offices and storage space and magazines and things like that. And there are 250 of you approximately on the ship, all living together. And there are all sorts of hardships with that and being out at sea that that a normal military hardship for the army or the air force or something like that is like secondary to living in this alien and cramped environment.
So while you were serving, did you have anyone that really helped you get through the days?
No,
No. Well, I mean, those are all my questions. If you
well,
have, you have,
that's interesting. I don't mean to jump on your back here, but if you go back to your opening statement, you never asked any questions about about that, about the type of people who were in and things like that,
well, I
about
kind of,
better people or good people, or if you go back to your opening statement, read that so I can, because I had things to say, but I want to relate to it exactly.
so basically my whole mission is trying to show that those who serve are just people. They put their lives on the line, many of them do, and the disrespect that many of them get is completely unjustified, especially for some people who didn't necessarily have a choice. So my whole point is that I'm trying to paint a picture of who these people really are and what they do on a day-to-day basis.
Well, well, I don't see it. I mean, exactly the way you seem to frame it. Okay, first off, let's look at the difference in who is serving now
Yeah.
versus back then. Back then, you had a draft,
Hmm.
and you had a lot of people who would enlist in lieu of a draft, and that includes officers and enlisted. The draft, when it's, which, well, no, okay. But anyway, so the average academic, intellectual level was much lower than than it is now. In
Mhm.
that, in that, in that you had a lot of people who were barely literate or whatever. Uh, Now you've got to be a high school graduate
To serve.
to get into the service.
Yeah.
Uh, so, 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 and because it's all volunteer, they have a better recidivism reenlistment situation
Mhm.
than they had back then. Uh, uh, Most people, okay, back back then, because of back during the years of the Vietnam War, uh, it started that military personnel stateside were strongly urged to wear civilian clothes on and off the base because of the anti-war
Yeah.
type thing. Some of that continued. I think it just became a habit that a lot of people who are in the military do. Now, after after Desert Storm, and even starting in uh, well, here let me. There started to be uh, people in the late 70s and early 80s starting to realize that blaming the soldiers for what was going on in Vietnam, they were blaming the wrong people.
Yeah.
Okay, and and what you should do is look up. Okay, a major performer of the anti-Vietnam War was Peter Yarrow of Peter, Paul, and Mary. Go carefully read the lyrics to "Light One Candle," which he wrote. The first stanza, the first four lines, are about the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah. The rest of the song is about the Vietnam War and coming to grips with many things about it. That There's an interesting line in there. I mean, that light one candle for all we believe in. Let's not become our own foe. Uh, uh, I don't have the lyrics in front of me. There's a part about let anger not tear us apart. So so it started to come to grips with that we shouldn't be doing this. And then if you get into, I think it was Billy Joel with, I think it was Billy, Good Night Vietnam. Again, understanding the people who fought in the war and giving them the respect that they deserve. And then it reached its height in 1991 with the Gulf War. So, except for a few off the left end of the world, most most Americans came to a better understanding of who to blame and who not to blame.
Mhm. So, do you have when you were back home and the anti-war movement was extremely prevalent, did you have any experiences that were sort of
None,
no?
none,
Okay.
none. In fact, the only time, uh, uh, okay, I'm a graduate of the University of Wisconsin,
Mhm.
and which was one of the centers of anti-war. But I was out there in. Uh, I went out there. Yeah, it was like towards the end of October, 1967, when I had 3 weeks of leave that I was taking. I spent two in New York, and then I went and visited my college roommate, and then some other people. And then, yeah, but my college roommate was in working in Minnesota for IBM at the time. So because I was traveling, on military standby and whatever, so I had to be in uniform. And I was on campus at the University of Minnesota in my uniform, and nobody said a word or anything.
Okay. Do you have any other questions for me?
Not that I can think of.
All right. Well, again, I really appreciate your time. You were my first interview for this project, so
You probably won't. Uh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, just let me leave you with this again. Let me explain that the Navy, serving in the Navy when you're at sea, is just different. That you're in an alien environment. People are
yeah.
not supposed to be there. The Army, the Marines, the Air Force, they fight an enemy.
Mm-hmm.
For the Navy, that's your second enemy. Your first enemy is Neptunus Rex, ruler of the raging main. And having been through a couple of typhoons in the East China Sea, uh, I never got seasick.
Good for you.
Ever. So
I
I'm
can't even go fishing.
okay. Uh, so to just to give you also how military, right, some people, one guy I know, retired naval officer, put it this way: in the Army everybody's a rifleman, in the Navy everyone's a fireman.
Mm.
um, that uh, that one way to understand how the Navy is different in all the other services, when you get fired on, you take cover and fire back. In the Navy, you keep doing exactly what you were doing unless somebody orders you to do something else.
Yeah.
You can't jump in the ocean because they're firing. You just keep doing your job unless somebody gives you an order that
Nowhere
tells
else to
you
go.
to do a different job. But anyway, that's it.
All right. Thank you. And you have the webinar tomorrow, correct?
And it's on Thursday.
Thursday? I'll be there.
Okay. Yeah,
Thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you.
yeah, you have to register first.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost anything.
I'm not worried about the cost.
Okay.
It was a pleasure meeting you.
Same here.
And
Good luck with your project.
thank you. Thank you for helping. I really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.